So just to start out, Wayne, if you would just give us a little bit of background on yourself and kind of what prompted you to get involved in the public service of County Board of Supervisors and what experience you've had that you bring to the table that might serve you well in that role.
Sounds good. So after graduating from Hempstead High School, I went to Loras College for 2.5 years in a pre-engineering program. While I was doing that, I was working nights for Interstate Power Company, driving a truck for a gentleman that used to change streetlights and respond to trouble calls. And so I decided I wanted to be a lineman more so than a engineer. So I left Loras and went to Northwest Iowa Technical College in Sheldon, Iowa, and completed a year program in the power line curriculum. When I came back, I worked a few odd jobs. In fact, worked at FDL for 12 whole weeks, and then was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to go back to Interstate Power Company and entered into an apprenticeship. Entered into an apprenticeship, a 3-year apprenticeship to be a lineman. And once I completed that apprenticeship, I actually went back to the University of Dubuque and completed a BA in business. So I worked as a lineman for 12 years, and then when the merger of Alliant came about, I had the opportunity to go inside and design projects, line projects. And so I did that for probably 4 or 5 years. And then the opportunity to be a substation maintenance and construction manager for the northeast corner of Iowa came up, and I was fortunate enough to get that position. I did that for about 6 years. And then Alliant sold off all of their high voltage transmission system, about 7,500 miles of transmission line, 350 substations throughout Iowa and southern Minnesota. And so I went to work for the company that purchased the transmission system, which is ITC, which is based out of Detroit, and basically made a lateral move into that organization as what they called a general foreman for the northeast corner of Iowa. And then later was asked to be the operations manager for the entire Midwest footprint, and did that for probably 6 years. And about 4 years ago, I was asked to be a project or process manager. So ITC's original focus was on reliability of the system. And as the reliability has improved over the last many years, it shifted a little bit to the cost of service. And so I utilized my experience to refine some of the processes we were doing to ensure that we were doing things in a cost-effective manner. And that's what I do as of today. In 2019, I was elected as the mayor of Sageville. Not a very large community, but as you probably know, most of the requirements, whether it's a small town or a large town, seem to be the same. So I've learned a lot as far as the government, local government is concerned. And that prompted me to attend Board of Supervisors meetings. So with the relationship between Sageville and Dubuque County, it was just a natural fit. And I'm the kind of person that I like to be informed and educated on what's happening, especially playing the role of the mayor. And so the mayor is a 2-year term. I was actually a write-in candidate in 2019. I won by 1 vote. The good news is in 2021, I was reelected with 85% of the vote. So I consider my approval ratings to have moved up the scale considerably. So, and it's been going pretty good, and I continue to attend the Board of Supervisors meetings. And that's really what prompted me to look at running for county supervisor after I watched how the county functions, the different aspects, and even the differences between the mayorship and the supervisor's role.
So can you share a little bit about your observations of how the county supervisors work and some of the things that you've picked up on?
Sure. So over the 2.5 years that I've been attending the meetings, most of them I'll say by Zoom, some by in person. Able to watch the interaction between the 3-member board is one of the things that drew my attention early on. Obviously back in December of 21, there was an article in the Telegraph Herald regarding a meeting that I was actually at, as far as the conduct of the members during that meeting. And then it was in April of 22, kind of a similar meeting, I'll call it, of the Board of Supervisors took place. And, it was kind of disappointing to me to watch those folks interact the way they did. I think it chews up a lot of time that they could be working on things more effectively. To me, you don't have to necessarily, like individuals that you work with, but you do have to get along and you have to work effectively with them. And I believe I can bring that to the supervisory board.
Mm-hmm. Do you think 3 is the right number for a county board of supervisors? Do you think there should be more? Would that make any difference?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it gets brought up quite often as I'm out visiting with the public and things. In fact, I was just at Eagle Point Senior Living last Friday, and that was one of the questions. And of course, there is a process that's already in place that if the public believes that a 5-member board would represent them better, that can take place. I've shared that with multiple people, but really haven't had anyone, make it sound like they were going to pursue that. My own personal thoughts are, whether it's 3 or whether it's 5, I don't think has a significant bearing on how the board would function. It's simply numbers. To me, I believe 3 people can represent 100,000 citizens of Dubuque County effectively. There would be obviously additional costs that would go along with that, roughly $150,000 by the time you got done with salaries and benefits and things of that nature. Sometimes a larger group can be beneficial. Sometimes it can actually make the process draw out longer. You got more opinions, you got more input, things of that nature. I really think what matters most is having the right people in those positions and being willing to listen to the citizens of Dubuque County and represent them versus, getting elected and simply using one's own personal thoughts. There needs to be that interaction between the Board of Supervisors and the community to be effective.
So Wayne, then is it your opinion then that a 3-member board is sufficient, and we don't need to look at a 5-member unless you wouldn't advocate for it?
I would not advocate for it. If the citizens of Dubuque County wanted 5 members, that's what should happen. It's not a decision that, should be made by the Board of Supervisors. It should be made by the people.
Okay. And tell us about, in your observation over this time that you've been tracking the issues that come before supervisors, are there some issues that have come before them that maybe you would have voted differently than what the county ended up doing? Or do you feel like they often get it right, headed in the right direction? Or tell us a little bit about your viewpoint.
Well, I think there's some differences, and again, it makes it a little bit hard because not all votes are unanimous, of course. So, but generally speaking, my focus, what I see as one of the main functions of Dubuque County, is the secondary roads, and bridges. Obviously that's one that floats to the very top of the list. Now, I think Anthony Burgett did a very nice job of planning and executing, the projects that have taken place. One of my questions that comes into play, and I haven't gotten a real good answer, even though I've discussed this with at least two of the Board of Supervisors, is why the capital budget line item in the last 3 years went from 7 million to 10 million, and this year is 15 million. Now, like I said, Anthony has been doing a great job. Obviously, that has changed over to Russ Weber. And I think Russ will do a great job as well. Obviously, he was working closely with Anthony. But to me, to watch that capital budget increase that dramatically, more than double in 3 years, is kind of a signal that perhaps, I don't want to say overspending. I've looked at the projects. They're good projects. I just don't see condensing that schedule and moving that budget to a $15 million a year project item. So that would be one that I would personally spend some more time looking at. I think at $7 million, the roads and bridges were improving at a pretty decent pace. I understand there's inflation, so moving to 10 million, probably covers more than that inflation rate. But jumping to 15 million just seems to be a little bit of a stretch to me. Other things that have happened, obviously the American Rescue Plan has been consumed a significant amount of time in the last year. What I would have liked to seen, and actually had discussions with, again, a couple of the Board of Supervisors, was about having some type of foundation, some type of guideline. Now, I know they did a good job. They went out for applications, outside applications, inside applications. It doesn't appear as though much of that is going to fall into the internal group of applications. More of it's going to fall to the external, meaning other small communities in Dubuque County, other organizations, other nonprofits. Some of those decisions I think were very wise. The program that Caprice Jones is working with on folks yes, great program. Not a very big contribution. I think it was $62,000. I think is what ended up going from American Rescue Plans to his organization. The Liberty House on 20th and 22nd and Jackson. Again, they did get some money, but it wasn't a real significant. I think those are kind of grassroots things that can really help the community, not necessarily focused on individuals, but again, benefits for the community. One particular application that or I should say, contribution they made was for the Field of Dreams. So I think it's a good project, but I don't necessarily believe spending over 25% of the American Rescue Plan money that went to the county, so the $18.9 million that went to the county, 5 million of that is going to the Field of Dreams project. I have had a difficult time finding members of the community that agree with that decision. And I personally don't agree with that decision. Should it be 0? Should it be 1 million or some other number? I think it could be, but I don't agree with the $5 million. Part of the explanation or part of the reasoning behind that has to do with economic development. And I understand economic development, but I think even though it was federal funds that the American Rescue Plan being federal funds, bottom line, it's still taxpayers' money. And to me, that significant of a spend, I think deserves input. And I don't think that happened. I think beyond that, when I first started talking about the American Rescue Plans, I think there could have been a little bit more I'll say high level planning that could have took place that would have helped the process. It wasn't until, I'm going to say probably 2 months ago, that they started talking about the administrative costs associated with distributing and managing those funds. To me, at the beginning, when you've got a pot of $18.9 million, you're going to need someone that manages it. Now, the county has run into some challenges because they've lost the human resource director. They've lost the director of the Board of Health. The budget director is not completely a standalone project, but doesn't have a significant amount of support. So they actually, at their last meeting, agreed that they were going to hire a budget analysis. And one of the things that I think comes out as a question there was, and there was some discussion and there wasn't total agreement with the board that should be a permanent position. If they're hiring someone to administer or support the American Rescue Plan effort, there almost seems to be a natural fit that is a temporary position. Now, of course, nobody likes to see an end date to their employment unless it's through retirement or by their choice. But in reality, the American Rescue Plan will end or come to an end point at the end of 2026. So I don't necessarily believe that it should be a permanent type position. And there are firms. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I'm staying on the theme, and I guess, were you finished with the position to manage the fund? Because I have another question related to ARPA.
Yes, go ahead.
One of the major impacts on our economy is the loss of air service to Dubuque Regional Airport, commercial air service.
Mm-hmm.
Would you support the airport requesting funding to help attract commercial air service to the Dubuque Airport?
So the meetings that I've sat in on related to the airport, it didn't necessarily sound like it. How would I say this? The airline is not from a funding standpoint, but from a pilot standpoint is why they've made their decision to leave Dubuque.
Correct. But if the Dubuque Airport was pursuing a low cost carrier to come to Dubuque, and we'll use, for example, like a Frontier or a Allegiant to fly some commercial flights out of Dubuque, but sought funding to help make that happen, would you support ARPA funds going towards something like that?
I would definitely support listening to what information they brought forward. To say that I would support that with what information I have heard so far, I would need more information to support that.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I'm going to jump in here for a minute. So Wayne, talking about some of the process that the county board has gone through, you mentioned, particularly with Field of Dreams, you mentioned maybe not getting adequate input, that you're not hearing from folks who support that measure. I think probably every edit board I've ever been in, a candidate seeking office always says there should be more input gathered. The existing office holders aren't doing enough. So my question is, how would you do that? How does that fit into kind of the normal course of business? And maybe you can talk a little bit more about how you think that the existing county board should be doing that.
Sure. So, obviously there's opportunities for people to reach out to, and I'll stay focused on the Board of Supervisors. So there's ways that the community citizens can reach out to them, whether it's email, whether it's phone calls. And in some cases, there's the opportunity for direct conversations. My intent and how I functioned throughout my career was not only open your door, but sometimes walk outside that door and interact with those people in that manner. One thing, and some people may not think this is a popular thing, but I'm also part and facilitate the Dubuque County Patriots. It was a group of people that I was introduced to about 2.5 years ago. It's a group that consists of 200 people that are interested in being informed as well as engaged with community activities as well as government. Our group we have worked with the school board to learn about issues and to share thoughts about issues and actually have resolved some. We also have interacted with the Board of Supervisors. We've also interacted with the Board of Health. Now, during a discussion last week, unfortunately, I was, I'm not sure what word to use here. I was, I found myself on the receiving end of some critical comments by a Board of Supervisor because I was part of that group. And anytime, a group comes together, there are some people that, lean heavily one way or another or have different personalities. And perhaps some of those have presented themselves in a less than desirable manner. But over time, our group has established, what our intent is, and that is to, again, become informed citizens and become engaged in the processes that happen around us. So my real intent is, I guess I want to answer your question specifically. My intent is there are ways to be an active listener and engage groups. Over my career, I've learned that the way you approach a person gives them, I don't want to say permission, but it gives them the feeling that they can talk openly without being aggressive, without being angry. There can be a conversation about issues that are happening, about things that are happening within Dubuque County, and come to a conclusion that it might not be perfect for each person, but it's better for the community as a whole.
So when you talk about some of the, feedback that you're hearing in Field of Dreams, you said most of the people that you've heard, you've had a hard time finding anybody who supported that. Is that the primary group that you're getting feedback from, or are you going to different groups as well?
No, and that's a very good point, Amy. Thank you for sharing that, because a lot of times what people will do is they will surround themselves with like-minded people. And it is true that there's a group that the Patriots that they want to become engaged, they want to become informed. But in the world of elected officials, as a mayor, I know where I can go and talk with people that agree with me. That's an easy one. It's a friendly environment. It works very well. What I pursue, though, is the other folks that have different opinions. When I worked as a lineman, I loved having performance evaluations, because what I used it for was to make myself better. I wanted to hear the good things. Of course, that's what keeps you going. But I also wanted to hear the things that I needed to improve on. Excuse me. And I've worked very hard to be that person that has an inviting personality, so people can share what they have to say, even if it doesn't agree with what I'm where I'm at with it. So it does take a lot of work, but it makes a big difference on people's performance, and I believe it will make a difference in how people interact and share their thoughts about what needs to happen in Dubuque County.
So, and do you hold a leadership position, or have you held a leadership position within that group, or are you just a member? Or?
I facilitate the meeting. Um, when I first started with the group, I spoke at their group and they liked my um, delivery, and they asked me if I would be willing to help them organize and facilitate their group. So I do facilitate it.
So
Oh.
when, you know, are the people, is the membership of that group, I mean, with that many people, I don't know if they're all like-minded, or if, I mean, because there are some very extreme views espoused on the Facebook page for that group. Is that like anybody who is a member would pretty much agree with that thing? Are you in agreement with the kinds of things that they post?
I don't necessarily agree how they post some things. And that's where you mentioned extreme. Excuse me. The extreme part is what I don't like. The lack of respect I don't like. Our group has had Sheriff Joe Kennedy there. We've had Stan Reingens there. We had all of the candidates, almost all of the candidates for the Dubuque County School Board. We've had some other candidates for various races come to our meetings and speak with us. And one of the main reasons I suggest that we do that is because then, rather than me or any other individual hearing a candidate speak and then putting their spin on it, they can hear those candidates speak directly. And I think that makes a big difference. You know, as I said before, anytime you have a group of people, you're going to have they're going to fall at various spots along the scale as far as how they feel about it and how they react to it. I have, actually interrupted during our meetings because the tone I didn't think was respectful. And to me, that's what needs to be in place at any given time.
I'm just going to jump in here, and before we move on, we certainly want to talk about a number of other things with you, Wayne, beyond this group. But in regards to that group, I think, Amy kind of hit on this, but I would be interested specifically. There are some posts and comments being made regarding election integrity. The last election, this false idea that it was stolen from then President Donald Trump. You're vying for a county office here. What are your thoughts on the last election, on election integrity locally, nationally? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, sure. So, in fact, again, I'll refer back to my visit at Eagle Point Retirement or Senior Living last week. One of the Board of Supervisors pointed out the very same thing. And our Dubuque County Patriots actually have been broken into subcommittees. And one of those subcommittees is focused on elections. Now, in my eyes, we have to break that into federal, state, and local. And so, I believe there were things that happened at the federal level that were not necessarily in line with voter regulations. At the state level, obviously, the state of Iowa has been given a distinction of being very good with elections, and I believe that is true as well. At a local level, and I think that's what's more important from my standpoint anyway, is I believe the elections in Dubuque County are secure. I've had conversations with Kevin Dragato and Jenny Hillary. In fact, had invited them to come to Dubuque County Patriots meeting, and they were presented with some questions, not at I should say, against my wishes. They were presented with some questions I thought were addressing election questions outside of Dubuque County. And I really, in all fairness, believe when you're talking with the Dubuque County auditor and the election commissioner, they should be related to Dubuque County.
Where would you get the information that leads you to believe that there was that things at the federal level were not in line with election laws?
Well, it's like anything. I mean, you can look almost anywhere, whether it's TV, radio, newspaper, internet. I mean, there's a whole host of things that will tell you either side of that story, that the elections were completely secure and there was no fraud. And then you can get obviously the extreme, the other direction of the potential things that, did happen.
Well, I mean, and there were multiple court cases and they, really couldn't prove any of
Right.
those things. So.
Right. And again, I'm not trying to insulate myself or anything, but I am not an active part of the election subcommittee. Basically, during our large group meetings, each of the subcommittees report out what they have been working on, what they're dealing with. I listen, but it's not my focus. For the last, since the first of the year, again, and even before that, by attending the meetings, my focus is on local issues. And again, I don't believe there was any I'm not sure what term you use there, but as far as local elections, I don't see that there are significant concerns with local elections.
Is there a subcommittee, Wayne, within that organization that you're involved in?
Probably the outreach committee, yes.
And what does that committee do?
Basically, the focus is on, informing folks about what the Dubuque County Patriots are and making it inviting for them to attend if they so choose.
And as you're out and about and talking with people in the county, what are you hearing as people's top concerns or priorities for the County Board of Supervisors?
Again, I would say one of the main ones is the collection and allocations of taxpayers' money. Last week by phone, I talked to Billy Selby because I want to get a better understanding of the assessment process, because we've heard that, for the last 6 years, the supervisors have voted to lower our taxes. Well, they have voted to lower the levy rate, but because the assessed values have gone up so much at the end of the year, almost everyone is paying more property taxes. And one thing I found very interesting when I talked with Billy Selby the other day, he indicated that don't be surprised if you see a 20% increase in assessed values going into the next few years here. And the reason for that obviously is the market price has gone up so much. Market price and assessed value need to, be within a plus or minus range by state regulation. And so, that's a given, that's a fix, that's going to go up. Now, fortunately, there's a 3% cap per year that taxes can be collected on. So it's not going to be a 1 year 20% jump in assessed values and a huge jump in property taxes, but it is going to lead to a significant increase in property taxes over the next few years if the tax levy rate does not change. And that's where I believe needs to happen. So from a budget standpoint, we can basically say assessed values are going to go up 3%. So therefore, the dollars we collect are going to go up. So do we need that increase in money to maintain Dubuque County at the right level? So if we don't need to collect that much tax, then we need to adjust more on the property levy rate. So it's a tough call, and it has to be done from both ends. But again, it almost ties back into the $15 million secondary road budget item And do we need to maintain that $15 million now? Therefore, we need to maintain the amount of property taxes we're collecting. Those are some of the things, and that's probably the most of what I hear out there is that we need to get a handle on the tax and spend part of this. And it affects not only property owners, but it affects businesses and all people throughout the county. There's the budget, and you guys know this. The expense budget, for this year is right around $75 million for the Dubuque County, and I would say the amount of property taxes, and that's a tough one to put your thumb on. Even when I asked Billy Selby that question, so how much property tax is going to be collected this year? Well, because of rollbacks and all those other good things, it's a hard number to come up with exactly. But in a nutshell, I would say about $35 million will be collected in property taxes this year. So obviously there's a difference, $40 million, but that's where the state and federal funds come in and different things of that nature. So, but I think the tax collection and tax allocation is the biggest issue that I hear.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you talked earlier about how, when you talked about allocation of county funds and county spending, you said a key thing for you is, secondary roads and bridges is for you a big part of the county's job and what they do. I guess I wonder, in your mind, are there other things in terms of county spending that you think be top issues for you? And are there things in terms of county spending that you talked about, do we need this much money? Are there things in terms of county spending that you think that we're spending?
Sure. Well, and again, whether it's spending too much or too little, I mean, there's that difference. And again, a lot of times, when people say it's the most important, it kind of pushes all those other things aside. And I'm not like that. To me, it's a pie chart. So if taxes are the biggest piece of the pie, all those other pieces of the pie are still important as well. For instance, Sunnycrest, that's a huge one. We sat over the last few years and we watched what happened, or I should say, the discussions that took place regarding Sunnycrest. Sunnycrest provides a substantial service to Dubuque County citizens. I also believe that an organization, an entity, call it, like Sunnycrest, needs to be run effectively. We can't, again, waste taxpayers' money. Those people need good service, and it needs to be done the right way. Now, go ahead, I'm sorry, Amy.
Yeah, do you think there are efficiencies to be had there, or?
Well, and again, that's sitting on the outside. I'm not a Sunnycrest board member. I'm not a supervisor yet. I'm assuming most of that information is public information, but I haven't pursued that level of detail. Sometimes I don't like sticking my nose where it isn't welcome. So I haven't necessarily pursued any financial reports beyond what is discussed at supervisors meetings as far as Sunnycrest is concerned. But I think it needs to be looked at. It needs to be monitored.
Any other areas where you think that the county might be spending too much, or where you'd like to see more county dollars go?
Well, and again, even when you say too much, I mean, it's not always that it's too much. Yeah, I'm running as a Republican, but that doesn't mean I'm try to pull the dollars back all the time. Let's take conservation, for instance. Again, I think Brian Preston is doing a tremendous job and has some, I'll say, very good visions based on input from community members on what the conservation department can do for Dubuque County and is doing for Dubuque County. The dollars, I watched the budget meetings earlier this year, and I see the dollars that are allocated to conservation. But I also saw when the $40 million bond was put in front of the people. Now, it wasn't a very large margin, but the people of Dubuque County decided that they didn't want that $40 million obligation. So again, It's not only what I think, it's what the people of Dubuque County think. And that's one of those occasions where a significant amount of money was being put in front of them, or the potential of that money being put in front of them as an obligation to pay back for the conservation effort. I think some people are very happy with the level of parks recreation in Dubuque County, and it seems like the people shared that at that time.
Is there anything that a role that the county could play in trying to address workforce shortage and workforce issues in the county and the greater Dubuque area?
That's a pretty big challenge. I don't know if that's a how would I say that? It's almost an industry-driven issue. Obviously, it's a result of I would say the main reason was the last 2 years and how COVID affected the community, not only the community but all over. So I think there are things that the county could do, but again, spending tax dollars to incentivize people to go to work, that's one I would definitely want to get input from people and have some more specific plans. That's a very general thought. Are there things? There could be things that the county could do, but again, I think it makes sense that taxpayer dollars are used wisely to do things like that.
I'll jump back in here, Wayne. So before you announced you're running for county board, and I think a lot more folks around the county have learned more about you in the time since then. Before that, you mainly appeared in the TH and elsewhere over the discussions about the mask mandates and COVID, and you obviously had some prominent views in regards to that. So kind of curious, looking back now, if you have any kind of thoughts overall how that was handled, and kind of going forward, if the county encounters another situation like this, how should county supervisors react? How should the county health department, what role should they play in something like that? I'm just kind of curious on your big picture views on all that.
Sure. So from the very start, and I'll say that was back in the early 2020 timeframe when I was just taking over as the mayor. So obviously that was one of the challenges encountered there. But what was unfortunate about this is that early on, at all levels, local, state, national, it was politicized. And what I saw happen was once that became a political issue, people didn't necessarily, I'll say, take a stance on the issue. They took it based on their political beliefs. And part of what happened was, with that being the focus, the information was not flowing in an effective manner, even to us in Dubuque County. Okay, what the focus was, coming from the CDC, WHO, all the other organizations, IDPH, and it seemed to be taken, or I should say, it was filtered in a political manner first, more so than the issue. And I think that was very, very unfortunate. And that's how it got spun into allergy season. And I'm doing pretty good, but So when people started putting their filter on, it became about more than just COVID-19. And to me, if it's a health issue, it's a health issue. It's not a political issue. And I watched that happen closely. And yeah, I spoke against mask mandates. I spoke against vaccination mandates and passports. I haven't changed my view on that. I do believe people need to take themselves into consideration when we have a health issue, and I believe they need to take into consideration other people. So I would not speak against anyone that wanted to be vaccinated or wanted to wear masks. I never did. It was a matter, in fact, that's where it was, in my eyes, almost its own separate issue when those things started becoming mandates. I think the the Dubuque County Health Department obviously, had a pretty big challenge in front of them. They had some turnover with the Board of Health at that time. I think it's a difficult challenge, but I also think if the focus would have been on the health part of it and not politicizing it, it could have been different, at least in Dubuque County.
I'm interested in what you mean when you say that you felt like it was, politicized, because I think you could find people on the right, people on the left, people in the middle who would argue that pandemic was politicized, but everyone's going to argue that the way it was politicized was the people who don't agree with them are politicizing it. So I wonder, in what sense do you see that as having been politicized?
Well, for instance, the way the information was shared, and again, most of this is not controlled within the county, but again, it's a reaction within the county. How the vaccine program rolled out, and maybe it's because I'm a project manager, and to me, when there's a task in front of me, there's just some automatic things that click that just start causing actions to take place. And by that, I mean, I had discussions with the Board of Supervisors and even the health department as far as enrollment for vaccination. So even though I was not in favor of a vaccination mandate, if there was going to be a vaccination program, my belief was it needed to be done effectively. And I think there were some errors there. I'm not normally one to sit and point out somebody else's faults. I'm more of the type of person that, if something needs to be done, I would rather take it upon myself than to criticize someone else's performance.
Well, we're closing in here. Our time's about
Sure.
running out. Is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you'd like to share that you think could be beneficial for voters to know about you?
No, I think, like I said, the main thing, and I know it can sometimes be a common theme by, the person that's not an incumbent, but, my willingness to interact, listen to people, I think is one of my strongest qualities. There's frustration in the community as far as how things are going right now, and the opportunity for that change is elections.
All right. Well, we really appreciate your time and willingness to talk with us today. So thanks for meeting with us, and good luck the rest of the way.
Well, thank you very much. It was good experience.
Good.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you.